Thanks so much for joining us today. It is so great to have you on. Stick around after this segment for my interview with candidate for Illinois State Comptroller, Holly Kim. It was a great conversation. We got to talk a lot about the role of comptroller. I don't think a lot of people quite get what that role looks like. So Holly was able to break some of that down for us and talk about some of her priorities and her background as Lake County Treasurer. It was definitely a conversation you don't want to miss. Okay. So let's look back to earlier this year. Elon Musk was continuing his reign of terror on the federal government. And it was, it was damaging. Like, we saw so many different programs get randomly cut. We saw people get put in uncertainty. It was not a pretty time. But amidst all of that, there was a debate going on in the US Congress of whether or not to shut down the government. This was mainly on the Democratic side, but there was a funding deadline that had to be reached. And amidst this reign of terror on the federal government, there was Democratic leadership that decided to keep the government open, to vote to keep the government open. Roughly, I believe over 10 Democrats voted to do that. And it was very unpopular among the left-wing base. It was not well received necessarily to do that. And it's not to say that, I'm taking like a stance on that. It's just what I'm reporting what I saw. And I saw a lot of people were very dissatisfied with that. And ultimately there were people that kind of decided that those senators dropped the ball a little bit. And I'll tell you why, because in this moment, what we need are leaders who are ready to stand up to what is going on in this administration. And at the time it was Elon Musk. Elon Musk obviously is no longer a part of that operation, but the ideas, the beliefs, the dogma, the whatever, the mechanisms of chaos that he was engineering, they still persist. And we need to figure out ways to stand up to it. We need to figure out ways to figure out how we even approach an issue like that. That brings us to next week. We are roughly a week away from a deadline for the federal government, once again, to fund the government. If the Congress is not able to pass a resolution or a budget or anything detailing how the government is to be funded, we will enter a government shutdown. And in a government shutdown, what happens is federal workers lose their paychecks. What happens is government operations, a lot of non-essential government operations cease because there's no money. There's no money being funneled towards that from Congress. Democrats have a lot of power right now. Democrats have a lot of power. They can do so much. And they can leverage for the very few times as a minority party in the legislature, they have the ability to leverage their votes. In the House, it doesn't really matter. In the House, the Republicans have a majority of seats. Like, they can introduce whatever they want and it'll pass. But in the Senate, you need 60 votes to make things happen. You need 60 votes to pass a budget, to pass a resolution, or anything because of the filibuster. Feel how you will about the filibuster, but right now it's pretty neat. It's a pretty neat fix when you're talking about it as the minority. Because of the filibuster, Democrats now have an opportunity to shut down the government in the name of protecting families. And that sounds counterintuitive. In all but practice, Democrats essentially would not lend their votes and the government would shut down. But they wouldn't shut it down because they want to shut the government down. They would shut it down. Really, it'd be actually the Republicans shutting down the government. The Republicans could not get the Democrats to vote. And the Republicans are the ones in the majority. So they have a lot more ability to write the policy. They have a lot more ability to detail what the budget should have. They should be able to detail what funding should look like. And some of that funding should stick onto some core values of Democrats. I mean, the type of budget they want to pass right now takes the people off of Medicare, takes the people off of food assistance, takes the people off of so many vital programs. Why on earth should we allow such a thing to continue is what Democrats should be thinking. And one of the few times where they actually have power and ability to do that is the government deadline, the funding deadline, and the showdown that's going on in Congress right now of whether or not to shut down the government. Democrats can do a lot, and they can fight for what they believe in. They can say we're not voting to fund the government if it's about taking people off of Medicare, if it's about giving tax cuts to the rich, if it's about taking people off of food assistance. There is so much opportunity. And don't think that Republicans are going to be so boo-hoo about shutting down the government. Like they're going to be like, whatever, I don't care. A lot of their policies that are hurting the American people, they need government money to be continuing that. They need government money to pay for a lot of the chaos of what they are instilling. And you can go and do your research of what exactly I mean by the chaos. But it is not in Republicans' interest to shut down the government either. And I don't know if they recognize that or not, but it's not particularly intelligent of them to be doing such a thing. And I think we need to be really mindful of that. And I think Democrats, there might be some Democrat elected officials watching right now. There are candidates for sure who want to be in those roles, who want to make the big changes. All I say is that in this moment, recognize your power, recognize your ability to make change. These platforms, you are not listening to a lot of us, but we have the ideas, we have what we want you to do. We know what people are talking about. Listen to us when we say that there is a power that you have. Utilize it. And if you're not going to, then you better have a good reason for why you don't want to utilize it either, because it doesn't make sense for that power not to be leveraged this time around without a good case. But we're going to be keeping an eye on what this government funding showdown looks like. I mean, hey, there's still 6 days. Stuff can happen. Who knows? Maybe like there's some sort of concession that Republicans randomly make. I know that there is a meeting scheduled between President Trump and Leader Hakeem Jeffries and Leader Chuck Schumer, but there is conflict and there's debate going on in the Democratic caucus of whether this should be done. And if you ask me, if I'm looking at this from a exercising of political power standpoint, it's a no-brainer. They totally should. Like, this is the few times where they have power, leverage it. Make your voice heard, as I've always said here on the show. But that's just what I think. That's just what I think. What do you think? Let me know down below. I think there's so much. But that's just my 2 cents on the budget stuff. I have a very exciting interview that I am excited to share now. That is with candidate for Illinois State Comptroller, one of the first statewide candidates we've had on the show, Holly Kim. I'm so excited to share that with you. That is coming up next. Yeah, take a look. So in this week's 2026 Watch, I am so excited to share our interview today. You know, we like to talk a lot about when it comes to statewide elected officials. We like to talk about governor and we like to talk about U.S. Senate. But there are roles in your state government that impact your life, arguably, I think, more sometimes than even those roles. And the importance of knowing who these people are matters so much. My guest for today's episode is one of those people who's putting herself out there and running to be the next state controller of the state of Illinois after our current one, Susana Mendoza, announced that she would be stepping down from the role after this election in 2026. My guest today is the treasurer of Lake County and has been doing a lot of work out in Lake County, and I'm so excited. So today we're going to be talking a lot about that. We're going to be talking about the role of controller, the headlines, and so much more. I am joined today by Lake County treasurer and candidate for Illinois State Comptroller, Holly Kim. Holly, thank you so much for joining us here on the Ishan S. Show today.
Yo, thanks for having me, Sean, and thanks to your audience.
Oh yeah, it's so great to have you on, and I'm so excited for our discussion today. But before we do jump into all of that, why don't you take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself to my audience?
Okay, yeah, so very quickly, my name is Holly Kim. I currently have the honor of serving as the Lake County Treasurer in Lake County, Illinois. What you should know about the Treasurer's office is that currently I am not only the Treasurer, which is the money coming in and investing it, but I'm also the Controller, which is the money going out. So I currently do both functions, and at the state of Illinois, it's so big that you have one person, the state treasurer, who does this, and one person who's the state controller who does that. I am running to be the next Illinois State Controller.
Very good. Well, let's talk a little bit about that role of controller. I think my audience, generally younger, high school students, college students, and we have a lot of older folks. I just got the numbers a few
Wow.
days ago. We are doing great among obviously Gen Z, but we are doing really good amongst our older friends as well. So, we're a team here. Anyway, I think it's important that we inform everybody about what this role looks like. So, could you describe the role of state controller? Like, I didn't even know, like, I mean, I knew that there was a treasurer and then there was a controller, but I didn't realize, like, what the distinction was even between those two roles. Like, could you go into the nitty-gritty of what that actually looks like and what kind of work you're doing in that role?
Sure. Yeah. So currently, as county treasurer, like I said, I do both. So that is one key distinction between me and the other people who are running is I'm already doing the job. So not only do all the checks go out in my name. So last year it was about $74 million in checks. And in total, about 3.2 billion with a B dollars come out of my office distributed. And since my name is on every check, I oversee the financial integrity of this office. It also leads to, thinking about things like cybersecurity, wire transfers. Like there's a lot of things you have to think about at the state level. It's a bigger version of the same. You basically, write the checks for the state of Illinois, but you also control the spigot. You can turn it on and turn it off or slow it down, depending on the priorities of the controller.
It's definitely an interesting role, and the I guess now outgoing controller Susanna Mendoza, she has done a lot of work from that office in the 8 or 9 years I think she will be in the role, like credit upgrades and making sure that Illinois' finances are in order. What kind of an impact does this role have? I mean, obviously we have Susanna Mendoza's work, but like more broadly speaking, like what is this office capable of? And I guess kind of transitioning into your reason for running, like what do you want to make of that office?
Yeah. So, oh my gosh, I have so many ideas for this office. So, what people should also know is my background is actually in the tech sector. So, my brain works differently than most people. It's a lot of outside the box thinking, a lot of, it's good to take risk in terms of like if you want to try something new, like let's think about how we're going to do that. So, I could quickly point to like some of the things I've done in my office as county treasurer as examples of things I could do at the state level. But in my office, we digitized a bunch of work so that staff is now able to take 2 work from home days. And they even
Yeah.
get to have summer hours and enjoy some of the summer, because like this is all like unheard of in the past, right? And not only did we modernize and launch new software, but we made it easier to pay your bill online. We streamlined processes. So things that used to take 6 months now take 2 days. There's not only a lot of modernization, and that's like my specialty hat, literally out of everyone running, that's my specialty hat. But when I think about, we did like a process mapping. And when I first got there, and it was showing like which job took the most hand touches. And it literally was mail that comes to the office where they have to open it and there's like a payment in there, right, to pay the property taxes.
Mm.
Meanwhile, we include an envelope in that bill that goes to like a robot scanner at a PO box. So if people do it that way, it gets processed quickly. When they mail it to our office, it does not get processed quickly. It gets processed by hand. And that's
Gotcha.
not only a delay, it's more human interaction, more chance for error. So one of the first changes I made based on that like data flow mapping was, why don't we just box all this up from the office and send it to the PO box with the scanner, right? And just in doing that, it's funny because there was resistance even to that. But in doing
Really?
that, well, because they're just used to doing things the old way, right? They're like, oh, it's not a lot of work. We just squeeze it in while we're taking phone calls and while we're taking.
Denial.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's so many stages to the grief, right? Or to the change. And it was like bins upon bins upon bins of mail. And I'm looking at it going, it does look like a lot. Like, I don't think it's a little. But just that change alone made such a difference in the turnaround time. So people are happier that their payments are going faster through our office and they can look it up online. So that's just one example. But in terms of like even at the office, the investments, like the way that we've changed how we invest so that every single investment bucket has done more than 200% in returns now after I've gotten there, just because like I'm really proactive and on top of all this. There's one bucket where the property taxes go in and out, and we negotiated the interest in that checking account. We got an extra $3.2 million. And what that means is every taxing body, every school, library, park got extra money they didn't even ask for. So there's a school out there that got an extra $90,000 they never asked for. And it was
Wow.
only because, yeah. And that's the thing is like when you
And that's
have
a
so
lot.
brain thinks differently, right?
Hmm.
And I'm ready
That's
to bring those
great.
skills to like the state level.
I mean, that's a lot of. I mean, I'm still sticking on the 90,000 to a school. Like I know, like out, being from Illinois, going to those public schools, like that's a lot of money that should be going over back to those schools. So I'm glad to hear that they were able to get that. Um, so I guess let's talk a little bit about the race for controller. My next question, I guess, is a little bit about. You kind of alluded to this in a previous answer, but more broadly, like you are running in a competitive field. I always like to say when we have competitive primaries, I say a very vibrant primary. How do you draw a distinction between yourself against your opponents and beyond your background in tech, I guess, and your innovative style of thinking? What more do you bring to the table that they otherwise would not?
Yeah, so actually I love that question because if we think about like who we want to do the job, that's one question. But the other question is what else do we bring to the table in terms of the future, in terms of getting more people who want to be part of a movement or part of a party or anything like that, right? And so I would say what I bring to the table in addition to like the way my brain thinks outside the box and modernizing is that I'm where the people are. I love people. I am not only like in person and I will drive out 6 hours to meet
Yeah.
with like different groups. I will. I already have. And I've been
Yeah.
all over like Southern and Central and Western Illinois and college campuses, but I'm also available everywhere online. And I think
Hmm.
that's something we have to think about in the future too, right? If you're going to be where the people are, I'm not only like TikTok, Insta, Facebook, but I also do not only like these podcasts like with you, but I do live streams where I interact with like there was this one event where after the event I went to a Kentucky Fried Chicken drive-through and I just pulled in the parking lot and I hit the live button and I was like, guys, I'm having like a dinner break after all these political events. And I go, but this is my time to like hang out with you and like answer your
Right.
questions, right? And
Hmm.
every single political anybody who's running for office should be able to do that in the future because we have to be where the people are. And I think that is vastly distinct between myself and the others is that I'm available like to the online audience as well. I'm also not only on social media, I'm a redditor. And I
Oh,
used yeah. So like I would do AMAs when I ran for village trustee, when I ran for mayor, and I'm not afraid to literally answer every question and be there for the people and have conversation. I don't think we do that enough in politics, right?
yeah. No, that's so true. And um, I appreciate the effort as well to be online because you know what, in these types of spaces, even here on the show, like I've been very open about this. Like candidates would not badger and maybe before last year to come on a platform like this, but then I remember when you wanted to come on the show and you reached out, and I was like, you are one of the few that took the initiative to reach out to come on the show. Usually it is me calling up people and like trying to roll down and find someone, and like it's always nice when you see the initiative. Um, and the effort to be on these online spaces because you know what, that is where people are, whether you like it or not. And
Yep.
there are people who in politics don't like it, cry about it, but like people are really on these spaces. And I imagine like if I get to the point where I'm able to clip this episode after we post it. That's the dream. Scheduling sometimes makes it hard, but usually when I clip episodes, like it is because I'm trying to get people to speak directly with you or to have you speak directly with them or myself,
That's right.
and it's a very personal connection that is built through an algorithm these days, and I will say like. usually your smartest folks are going to know and pick up on that. And so I'm glad to see the effort and the work that is being put and to the credit of folks in politics, I am seeing that effort now a little more wide scale, but like, it's good.
We should have
Um,
been there a while ago, to be honest. But everyone was just so worried about being polished. But to
yes.
be honest, nobody wants that anymore. They want
Right.
real, like genuine, like trustworthy people that you're like, okay, I trust that person, that they're going to do not only a good job, but that they're the person they appear to be in front of me, right?
Exactly. And I still believe that knocking on doors in politics is the best way to do it. But when you're running in a big race, like you're running statewide, like it's 10 million people, like you could never, I'm
I will
sure,
not be able to hit every door in
you
this.
will not be able to hit 10 million doors. If you did, I believe there are a lot of offices that you could be looking at beyond that. But when it comes to these algorithms, or when you make a TikTok or when you make an Instagram reel, like that is a one-on-one,
This is
well,
a door.
it's a door. It's a door, and it's not even, you don't even have to ring a doorbell and wait. Like they swipe and it's there. And I think that's probably the best part of it. So yeah, like I guess shifting gears a little bit, when we are talking about, and I want to get this because your background is obviously in government finance roles and stuff of that nature. I've been talking a lot about the big ugly bill on this
Mhm.
show that is the flagship Republican policy. Just for folks who don't know, it takes 17 million Americans off of their health care, robs 3 million veterans and seniors and kids of free school lunches, makes life harder for Americans. It's affecting a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And I've been asking candidates about what it is that they have noticed in the big ugly bill, and stuff that maybe we're not talking as much about here in the media or like in these positions. But I want to ask you more specifically, since you deal with money as your day job, like
Yeah.
government money as your day job, like, and you're running to be that person at a state level, like when you look at the big ugly bill, what is the most concerning thing to you? And what is something that we are not talking about enough in that piece of legislation that we should be talking about?
So there are a couple things leading up to that presidential election that, as a money person, I was concerned about, and literally like nobody talked about. One of them is that for the first time in history ever, the history of the United States, and this is an easy Google search you could pull up, and it is the GDP versus debt ratio in the United States. And for the first time, our debt eclipsed our output, and so that our debt is higher than our GDP, right? And so this is big. This is huge, meaning like, how are we ever going to pay back the debt? Nobody talked about that during the presidential election, literally nobody. And yet that is a big deal, right? And so it is interesting because a lot of things that are implemented right now are ways for all of us in the US to pump more money, like the tariffs. It is a tax. It's a tax on not only
Yeah.
the owner, it's a tax on all of us who buy anything. And it is just mental gymnastically odd to me how people swallowed this pill thinking it's a good thing when it's us. We're the ones who are paying for, this output difference that they're trying to shore up. Now, what's interesting and going to have lots of long-term repercussions from that is because if we're not able to, sell the soybeans because of the tariffs, all these other countries, for example, like China or Asian continents or Asian countries where they eat a lot of soybeans, they're resourcing it from other countries now.
Hmm.
And those countries are going to adjust to like their demands, which makes a long-term problem on whether they will ever come back to the United. Like, let's say we have a different change in president. I don't know when it's ever going to come back that they'll resource from the farmers here when they've already got new connections all over the place. And that's only soybeans we're talking about, right? Think of that globally with lots of other products as well. Those tariffs are a huge economic problem. And it's interesting because even people who, are very capitalistic, all about free market enterprise, they should be against this.
Yeah.
Where are
It is,
they?
it's like so, yeah, I mean, you are so right. And I think it's deeply concerning. Like you bring up soybeans, like Illinois is one of the biggest if not the biggest, maybe you know, I'm not sure specifically rankings for soybean producers, but I believe
We have a
Illinois,
lot of soybeans. Yeah.
a lot of soybeans, and specifically with the example of soybeans, Trump put soybean tariffs first time around too, and they China and other countries that do consume soybeans, and I don't think I think they're European countries. There are some countries in Africa that bought our soybeans. They pivoted to Brazil. And
Yeah,
Trump
Brazil is it.
left. Yep, Brazil. And Trump left office. Biden came back and he kind of tried to fix the problem, but Brazil is an option now. And it's like I'm glad you brought up the issue of the tariffs, but more the GDP to debt ratio. I think that's a very existential crisis and very concerning. When you see the big ugly bill's impacts on a state level, I mean, naturally, if you are elected in 2026 and you are sitting there in 27, you are going to be dealing with the effects of this. Like the state of Illinois is going to lose money, federal funding. Like we're going to lose access to some streams of revenue. Like what challenges do you foresee for the next controller when it comes to dealing, actually, not even just the big ugly bill, just with the guy
Right.
in the White House right now, like just the challenges.
So to add to your last question too, also, and I think very relevant, is also this explains why he's trying to charge $100,000 for H-1B visas annually, right? He's just trying to fill in the holes of like the gaps with our own people, our own companies, our own like for all
Yeah.
future H-1B visas. So then the question becomes like, what then as like controller, like, are your concerns and what can you do about the impending, like, so there are grant cuts coming, right? And the importance will be that the controller's office keeps the spigot going. As someone who had a kid in college and I use like WIC, Medicaid, and like the Head Start program, like my priorities will always be like, it'll be to our social services. People need these services. I will tell you that back when Rauner was in charge and there was no budget passed, I sat on the board of this nonprofit called Hunnell Family Alliance, and it was a senior care organization. We send home health care to the homes to cook food for seniors, help them take a bath, all this stuff. We had only 2 months operating budget left because we kept providing services without the state of Illinois paying us. And we're like, how much longer can we do this? And our big question to us as board members were like, if we don't do this, who's going to take care of all these seniors? Right.
Yeah.
So that like background is seared into my brain. Like going into an office like this, just like I've done at the treasurer's office, is to be really the intersection of a math job and social justice. Is how can I do that at the controller's office? Is yes, modernize software, yes, make process better, but then also like have that heart to know when even I use these programs to keep Medicaid going, the seniors. I will tell you that federally they are cutting grant funding to rural health centers, and rural health centers were already having a hard time. So for them to have either grants cut, like some of them are going to close up shop, and it's really a bad situation because people in rural parts of Illinois were already driving like 2 hours to go get, a hospital somewhere else. And these rural health centers were like the middle gap. So then as controller, I will have to make sure I keep that faucet flowing on the state of Illinois money because we can't be late on any of it if that's going to be the difference between payroll and keeping the lights on.
It's devastating. And you mentioned the rural hospitals concern. Every week or so, I will get a report somewhere. I'm on some email list that talks about this sort of thing. And every few weeks, I will get an email about three three hospitals shutting down in Virginia, for example, we heard just yesterday. And I mean, Illinois, we talk a lot about Chicago and the collar counties and all that, but we are a very rural state. Like the vast majority of that state, of our state, is rural, and it is impacted. Like with the big ugly bill, 500,000 people are losing access to Medicaid coverage, and Medicaid coverage doesn't just help the people on Medicaid, like it helps those rural hospitals that depend on that revenue.
Yes.
And you know, if you get rid of the money, doesn't get rid of the issues, people are still gonna have diseases. People are gonna still have to go to the emergency room. Now there's gonna be fewer hospitals. Now there's going to be more people, more of us in the community that are going to have to also take on to that burden and to help support our neighbors.
Right.
Um, it's just ridiculous, and I
And the
don't
Medicaid
end.
is all over the state, right? Even in
Yeah,
city centers. So when my
well,
kids were
yes.
Medicaid, which was the all kids program for their immunizations and all that, those pediatricians, all those doctors' offices in the city that are helping, people who are vulnerable, they're dependent on those reimbursements to be timely.
That's true. And there's nursing home care. There is end of life care. Oh my God, there's so much.
All those checks come from the controller's office, so we gotta keep it
I
timely.
I
Yeah.
I don't envy the massive load that I'm sure you would have to deal with if you are elected. But you know, it's going to be an important challenge and it needs to be dealt with. Holly, I want to talk a little bit about the experience of running a statewide campaign. I think, if I'm not wrong, you are one of the first statewide candidates that we have had on the show, one of the first ones we've had. I'm curious about what that experience looks like. Illinois is a very big state, a very diverse state, all sorts of different nooks and crannies that you can go and visit people of all kinds of backgrounds. Like, what is it like? Tell us a day in your life as a candidate running for state office.
Yeah, so definitely as a candidate with experience and, going back to all the stuff coming down, Holly, what can you do? Is I think that's why it's so important someone with experience and kind of like that weathered sea captain who's at the wheel who's been through some like crazy times, like me having to weather my office through COVID time was pretty crazy as well.
Oh yeah, I'm
So,
sure.
yeah, I've lived through a lot, and I think that's actually one of my benefits to this office. And as for like campaigning in the state of Illinois, I love it, dude. I love people. I'm such a golden retriever, and I'm like, oh boy, people. Like, it's funny because I think growing up, you always told kids like, don't talk to strangers. But like my literal life and job for the last like decade has been talking to strangers, and I love it. So I meet people where they're at, and so I grew up in the city of Chicago, and I've even lived in the south suburbs and Matteson, and like now I'm in the northern burbs, and so I've lived like all around. And currently I have like fruit trees, backyard chickens, I have a goat. And so I connect with literally everybody, whether it's like inner city, whether it's suburban, whether it's rural, and even driving down to Southern Illinois. Like I brought like a jar of jam that I made from grapes from my own yard. And I told them, I go, look, if they pick Tim Walz as vice president because he brought zucchinis in a basket, then hopefully this will be my lucky charm, right? And so like everyone I met out in rural areas, I brought them the jam, and like, in and we have great connections all over. I have such good reception from people, and I will tell you that it's like missions work, and that you go out into the community, with your heart just in the right place, and you're the gospel that I'm spreading is like Holly Kim for Illinois State Comptroller. And everyone's been very nice and it's been very well received. And I think it's because I connect with people on that human level. Like I said, even connecting online, like I'm still myself, the same Holly you'd see at the door. And this is what people want nowadays. They want a genuine person.
Very true. Now, speaking to those connections that you've been able to make with people, what are they telling you in terms of their concerns and what they're thinking about right now?
So what I've heard directly is number one, that they love the current controller, Susana Mendoza. And she has been my work mentor for the last like 6.5, 7 years. And so I hear them. I have a lot of energy too, just like her. And I'm willing to drive around the state of Illinois just like her, because that's what they're afraid of, is that whoever it is that wins isn't going to visit them as often. And a lot
Mm.
of people in Southern or Central Illinois, they feel like they're like neglected, or that no one comes to
They're
their
left
events. They'll
behind.
invite people. Yeah, they'll feel left behind. And they're like, hey, this, when you represent the whole state of Illinois, you represent more than just the city up there, right? So that's what the feedback is that I receive from like even Western Illinois, like all over. And I'm like, I guarantee you, look, like my personality is the type that I'm gonna. And growing up, my dad was actually chamber president. So the way
Oh,
you always did business was face to face, in person, and handshakes. That's how you do business.
Well, nice. That's a good experience, I guess, to have as well. Actually, that's really good experience to be able to see your dad doing that sort of work as well. Well, Holly, we are running out of time here for our interview
Sorry.
today. Uh, I'd love to have you back on very soon to have an update on the campaign. But before I do let you go, are there any parting thoughts that you'd like to share with my audience?
Yes. So number one, make sure you put in your calendar to vote in the primary election. There's 5 of us running. I am just one of the 5, and I can win with your help. The main thing is people need to vote, right? So that is important. The second thing is, one, someone who can do the job. Out of all the candidates running, I'm actually doing the job already. So like that's great. But the other thing to consider is, out of all the people running, it's like who can create a movement? Who will get more people into this big tent? And I think that's really important nowadays because it's not just about voting a candidate. It's what else will they do in the future in terms of helping, like not only people, but a movement, right? And definitely as someone who lives on the internet, I would appreciate being the internet's choice.
All right. Well, Holly Kim, Lake County Treasurer, candidate for Illinois State Comptroller, thank you so much for joining us here today on the show. And like I said, I'd love to have you back on very soon ahead of the primary. I'd love to get a campaign update, love to hear what people are telling you in a few months maybe. Let's make it happen. Of
Yes. Thanks for having me.
course. Alrighty, that was my interview with candidate for state controller Holly Kim. Thank you so much to Holly and her team for making this interview happen. Uh, if you liked my commentary from today, talking about the government shutdown or my interview with Holly, then why don't you go ahead and subscribe to my Substack? It's a great way to stay in touch with the show. Another great way to stay in touch is to follow us on Instagram at the Ishan S Show. I like to post clips of interviews and from episodes on that platform. And if you want to follow me on Instagram or TikTok, you can follow me at Real Ishan Shrivastava. And you can find me on Blue Sky at ishanshrivastava.bluesky.social. Alrighty, thank you so much for joining me for this episode today. Thank you always for sticking around and keeping up with my random schedule. Keep using your voice in this moment because we need you to use it. And, stick around for the show. We have a lot of fun interviews and a lot of conversations to share. I'll see you in the next one.